Hey, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the show. It's Wednesday. You know what that means. We're talking about Lord of the Rings, you guys. Look, sometimes you got to take a break from the Star Wars and the Marvel, and you got to talk about the swords and the shields and the rings, baby. And with me to do it, Eric Goldman, Kim Taylor Foster. Hello, my friends.
Hello.
There.
So we've known some broad strokes about this Lord of the Rings series for a little while. We know that it's very expensive. We know that they've been casting a lot of roles, and in that we know that they've been really focusing on. They've been taking a New Hope approach, if you will, on unknowns and sort of fresh faces as opposed to big marquee names, which I think is really interesting. But as of today, I feel a little bit like I am back in high school because once again, I am scouring the onering.net for info about a Lord of the Rings project. It takes me right back, man, to like 1998 when I was finding out who was going to play Boromir in Fellowship of the Ring. So I'm actually really excited. I think of the three of, well, Kim, I can't speak for you. I know Eric and I are very like casual Tolkien fans. I have read the books many times.
I'm not really a fan.
I love the movie. Eric doesn't like anything with swords or elves. He's racist against elves.
That's your prerogative, Eric.
Right. Yeah. Just keep it out of here. Keep,
What if I got up and walked away?
You know what? I'm done. I'm absolutely done. Kim, before we sort of get into the synopsis and stuff, I don't know, what's your excitement level for this?
Am I a fan? Yeah, I mean, I am really, I would call myself a fan, definitely, though I'm not sure I have, I mean, it's labyrinthine, the backstory, all the background, and I wouldn't say I had a huge in-depth knowledge of all of the backstory, but I try. And I'm very excited. My excitement levels are high. You talked about the lack of known talent involved, and in particular the showrunners who have nothing to their name, which is kind of worrying. But it's also a move I'm very excited for. It's very bold, isn't it? So
yeah, it is, right. And in a way, it's a little like, obviously Peter Jackson wasn't a complete unknown, but he was kind of this like B movie, like I've made a couple of Evil Deads, hand me a Spider-Man. It's a similar sort of jump as Sam Raimi made to Marvel movies. So it's so interesting to me that sort of in that spirit there, because, he was the one really, I don't know if this was the case, if these unknowns were running around being like, give us billions of dollars to make a Lord of the Rings show. Amazon.
Do they have something on somebody? Maybe?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they got some photos of Bezos. But I absolutely agree. Just like the spirit of
yeah,
it really seems like they're going for talent and vision, and I think that is just really, really interesting. Obviously, aside from Eric, who hates everything fun.
That's me.
I agree with you on this. This fandom is always very challenging to me. I mean, the nature of it, and by design, because that's what he was basing it off of. Being like an intense fan of Lord of the Rings is like being a really intense fan of like Greek mythology. We're like, I have my baseline. Like I've seen Clash of the Titans, so I always really respect the fan base, and anytime Stephen Colbert starts dropping knowledge is always awesome to me. Let me hit you guys with this with this synopsis. It will mean it will be just pain in Eric's ears because he hates it. It might not mean a lot to Kim and I. It might mean stuff to folks in chat. I also want to get y'all's thoughts in chat, and also keep sticking around with us after Lord of the Rings. We're gonna answer your questions. We're gonna do an AMA, and then we got some WandaVision treats coming up here at the end. So stick around for all of that. Let me give you the synopsis. This is via the onering.net. Amazon Studios' forthcoming series brings to screens for the very first time the heroic legends of the fabled Second Age of Middle-earth's history. This epic drama is set thousands of years before the events of Tolkien's The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and will take viewers back to an era in which great powers were forged, kingdoms rose to glory and fell to ruin, unlikely heroes were tested, hope hung by the finest of threads, and the greatest villain that ever flowed from Tolkien's pen threatened to cover all the world in darkness. I'm embarrassed to say that I can't remember that guy's name.
Frank.
But he's bad. It's Tim the Enchanter.
Eye of Frank.
Beginning in a time of relative peace, the series follows an ensemble cast of characters, both familiar and new. That's interesting to me. As they confront the long-feared reemergence of evil to Middle-earth, from the darkest depths of Misty Mountains, to the majestic force of the elf capital of Lindon, to the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor, which, even casual movie fans, you know Numenor. It's in there. It's locked in your head somewhere. To the
Misty Mountains, I know mostly because I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan. So there you go.
Yeah, I was gonna say
always a way in.
Yeah. Look, if you're a Led Zeppelin fan, you're by proxy a Tolkien fan. You're just
It's true. It's true.
Deeply closeted. These kingdoms and characters will carve out legacies that live on long after they are gone. So that's the premise. The show is currently planned as I love how much just confidence they have in this thing. A minimum 5-season series with 8 to 10 episodes per season. Again, around Eric, I think I'm right. I think I'm not just making up numbers. It's around $1 billion price tag for the.
I think it was something astounding like that. Yeah. I know it was the most insane amount we've ever seen for a TV series. Yeah.
So knowing all that, clearly this is a huge swing. This is definitely, an attempt to return us to event television. There's been a hole at the water cooler since Game of Thrones ended, for instance. And now, especially with Mandalorian, WandaVision cranking up. Do you guys think there's room for a franchise like Lord of the Rings to sort of expand its scope past the trilogy that we know and compete in that world?
I mean, I think, look, as much as I'm not into Lord of the Rings that much, I don't hate it, just not into it. Look, this show's existence.
So weird, Eric.
The show's existence makes sense. You have this massive IP. Game of Thrones, of course, is a huge reason this show exists. That everyone is trying to be like, "What's the next Game of Thrones?" And someone's like, "Hey, it's like Warner Media teaming up with Amazon to be like, look what we got. We can do an actual Lord of the Rings show." But yeah, I look at what the Hobbit movies, which I only saw the first one because that I really didn't like, but they still made better part of $1 billion each, right? It's even though it seemed like one of those things where people kind of doing it out of I kind of feel like I have to do this because I didn't sense a lot of enthusiasm even from big Lord of the Rings fans. But I think when you look at that kind of money, you're like, yeah, we want to do this series. There's an audience here. There is a brand here. It'll get people that might not have checked out another series like this to look because it is Lord of the Rings. So it is astounding and crazy amount of money to put in, but I get it when I think the Hobbit movies, especially because they were so received and yet still made a nice amount of money, kind of helped cement that this would happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think, absolutely it can compete. It's got that built-in fandom. It's got that rich mythology that we touched on, and Game of Thrones has proved, and The Witcher and other things that there's this huge market for fantasy fare and swords and sex. And I understand that there were rumors that it was going to be more adult than the movies. So I don't know if that's still the case.
Lord of the Rings After Hours.
Yeah. Lord of the Dark. Well, I agree with you completely, Kim, especially about, Lord of the Rings has its built-in fan base. But also I think we're seeing more and more the slow creep of fantasy building back in. There isn't an established fantasy flagship going right now, like say Star Wars has. But from all these, it's hitting from all of these different angles. The rise of Critical Role, which is just unprecedented and crazy, obviously of just watching their D&D campaign weekly on Twitch is huge, but now they're adapting as an animated series. I think they have a cookbook, so there's a huge rabid audience there. D&D in general is blowing up continually, as we know, because it pays for this show. Um, but and like you said, The Witcher was such a huge unexpected surprise on Netflix. I do think there's absolutely a huge audience for this. I'm super sword and sorcery and sex horny for this show.
And so is Peter Jackson. I remembered a conversation. I interviewed him a couple of years ago about and asked him about this show. And it was after kind of the rumors that he might be involved were dismissed, but he said he was really looking forward to watching a live action Lord of the Rings adaptation that he wasn't involved in, because he didn't enjoy his movies because he was too close to them. Though he made the movies that he wanted to see, he couldn't enjoy them. So, and he loves the IP. So he's going to be sitting there as a fan, like me, not like Eric. Maybe
I'm going to check this show out. Don't get me wrong. I'm not banning it or anything.
We're going to do a podcast called Fight Watching Lord of the Rings with
originally the show was rumored to be focusing on a young Aragorn in Rivendell. And they switched to the Second Age as this new synopsis confirms.
Well, which ties in to me to what you were saying, Kim, about the approach with talent and the creators, because it seems like that premise fell apart once they had all their creatives in the room. Yeah, and I think that's so cool that they were just like, you know what, we're hitting a wall here, and this isn't the story we want to tell. Let's pivot, because Young Aragorn in Rivendell does sound like a CW show. I'd watch it.
We'd all watch it, Joe.
But it's definitely a different show than.
Well, it's how some DC shows are now being done for CW and some for HBO Max, and we kind of think they'll have very different vibes. Like they can still do that. That could be the CW show. A much lower budget, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I would absolutely watch a Riverdale style Rivendell.
Yes.
I will watch that. Sorry, Kim, I cut you off.
No, I can't remember what I was going to say now, but you did say, you mentioned when you were reading out the synopsis about you paused and you said new characters and what familiar ones that we already know. So I wanted to pick up on that, because I think in this age that it's covering, we'll see Elrond, we'll see Galadriel, who are obviously familiar from the movies. And also Isildur, which is interesting. He also popped up in the Fellowship of the Ring, but he is the character who initially takes the ring or cuts the ring from Sauron's hand and refuses to destroy it. So, perhaps we'll see. Well, I'm sure we'll see the lead up to that.
Yeah, and we should say that even though Jackson's not involved, he has mentioned that he is from what he's hearing, it's continuity with his movies. This is not a reboot, a reality. Again, it is Warner Media. New Line is involved with this, like they were with the movies. Right. So I am guessing we will see at least one familiar actor from those films get a very nice paycheck to show up. The show
for Hunter. Yeah. I do think, and the continuity thing is interesting to me because, really there's only one, there's one continuity to Lord of the Rings. And I agree, until they decide to just redo the trilogy somehow. Yeah, it all fits together nicely. But I do think there's, if this proves successful and they prove that there is, hunger for a Rings verse the same way there is for Marvel shows, I do think there's room to play. The Shadow of Mordor game series, is in continuity, but it's definitely its own thing. And I think some of the weird, I think they made kind of some lore breaking choices that ticked off a lot of fans. So it's definitely off doing its own thing, but it's fun and it's cool. I think if they prove there's a market, there is room to play a little more, outside of the margins of Tolkien's notes and journals, which I think could be really interesting.
Providing the estate is on board with it, Joe.
Right.
Yeah, from what I understand, no small is in itself like taking the Ring to Mordor.
Yeah, it's one of those things because no major, Time Warner does not own the IP, and so there's always heavy negotiations and lots of legalities that need to be worked out before there's any new incarnation of this universe. And I think that'll always be the case. Kind of like a Bond with the Broccoli's, how it's like co-owned by MGM, but there's also this other factor. That's kind of thing that happens with the Rings verse.
Well, a couple creative things we do know. Obviously, again, like you guys pointed out, our showrunners are pretty much unknowns. J.D. Payne and Patrick McCain. They wrote a screenplay that didn't end up being used for Star Trek Beyond, and a fourth Trek film that also ended up being unproduced.
I think that might have been the one that Hemsworth was supposed to be in, if that hadn't fallen.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Could be wrong about that, but I think that might have been that one.
They wrote a script for the Jungle Cruise movie. I'm not sure if we're saying that their Jungle Cruise movie script was also unused. I love the idea that
the reason I parsed it that way is because I don't think their name is on the final movie, but that happens so much with these giant tentpole movies where they wrote drafts, and I bet there's little elements of their stuff in that final movie, but it goes through so many people.
I just love the idea of these guys that continue to get their shot blocked.
It's a weird thing with big movie writing, and having friends who are screenwriters I learn more and more about, where it's like you can be a successful writer of sorts in that you keep being paid to make things, but your name is never on anything, or it's never like your final. I was a big fan of The 100, and Jason Rothenberg, who developed that show, had a similar thing where he had made a lot of money as like the writer of a Twilight Zone movie that never got made, and all these other things, but there was never a movie with his name on it, and then suddenly he was running this show. So there's like a lot of these. I think they said they've been writing partners for 20 years. They've been hired many times by major studios.
That's
You've just never seen a movie with their names on it.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
A name we do know attached to it, J.A. Bayona, who did The Orphanage and A Monster Calls and the second Jurassic World, directed the pilot. So we can assume that that's sort of the tone setter, and kind of the pace car for the rest of the series. And while I don't love the story of Jurassic World 2, he's a
good director.
Yeah, he's a good director. I just, don't dig those movies. Not his fault. Maybe it's his fault. I don't know.
And then I saw that Brian Cogman, who wrote a lot of like the best Game of Thrones episodes, had been originally said to be a consultant. And when THR, someone said, "Oh, he left the they made it sound like he never worked on it, and then he actually tweeted that he did work on it. He just ended up he was never going to be full time on it, so he was in sort of early development. He was there to kind of think maybe bounce ideas. You just did a giant epic, fantasy series before he moved on to other stuff."
Fantasy show consultant. That's a dream. That's
right.
That's the dream job, baby. Fantasy. I come in, I give my opinions about swords, and I leave. I'm on to the next show. Oh God!
I guess this is the era for that, right? I got to go to The Witcher now. I'll see you.
You guys have any other thoughts, feels on Lord of the Rings before we move on?
Uh,
Well, this show's gonna do great. $1 billion, baby.
No, it will. It doesn't need me. That's the thing. It doesn't need me.
I thought we were going to talk about Numenor a bit more. Can we talk about Numenor?
We absolutely can.
Ask me a question.
Kim, what do you think Eric's going to be most excited to see about Numenor?
Well, actually, here's a little nugget of information I can share, Eric. Numenor is a bit like the Galapagos Islands in that it has species of plants and one bird that are native only to Numenor, can't be found elsewhere in Middle Earth. And the bird is called, I've written this down, the Kirinki, and it's like a wren in size, and it's scarlet red.
Nah, I bet we have a great page for that on our wiki. Usually,
we absolutely do. Kim showing the skills right now.
I'm hoping we'll get a glimpse of it in the new series.
It's like my mind is so filled with like random Star Wars stuff that I don't need to know. So I feel good that people have other stuff they know. We all have our base of knowledge there.
Yeah. My knowledge, back in the day, I thought that the fact that I had like read the appendices several times at the end of like Return of the King was like enough, it is not.
Did you actually do that, Joe?
I did. I really loved that stuff back in the.
I love that.
my reading approach to Lord of the Rings after a while when I was a teenager was skip all the Sam and Frodo stuff and just read the Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stuff, and then go right to the appendices for a long time. Because, man, if it felt long with them walking in the movies, it also felt long in the books sometimes, especially when you're like 12 and you're like, swing a sword at something. But I have a feeling we're going to get quite a bit of that. And those Wrens. If we don't get those Wrens, I'm not watching. I am not watching.
You are out.
I am absolutely out. We're going to get into some AMAs, some questions from you guys in the chat. Thank you guys so much for watching. And, if you haven't subscribed and you like our Fantasy Wren Talk, hit that bell. We appreciate you guys being here. Let's see here. We got some chat questions. Dan Luckett asked, Joe, are you auditioning for Lord of the Rings with the beard that you're rocking? You know what? Yeah, I'm going to shoot my shot. I want to at least be an extra somewhere. I feel like I can clean up the sides a little bit and just do those, some like weird Celtic, head tattoos on the side here.
I just want to see you going like, they're coming, run!
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I do have two dream roles. My only two on-camera dreams, because I don't love being on camera necessarily, but I do have two on-camera dreams. I want to be a cop in a Batman thing that says, they say he's a man or some kind of creature. I want to be that cop. And I want to be a guy in a fantasy show that yells, dragon, and points at the sky. Very much.
I want you to live those dreams.
Someone please make those things happen for me.
It's out there now.
Well, here's the thing. We're going to get you on Matt Reeves' Batman Gotham PD show, and we'll get you on the Lord of the Rings show, and you'll do it.
Thank you for manifesting for me, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Those are both Warner Media projects, so we just got to get you a good in over there.
Shout out, by the way, to Billy Business, who is helping out this week while Ryan had to step away, who made sure that most of the questions were about my beard. I'll move through this one and then everything non-beard. Adam said, how long will Joe keep his Rick Grimes beard, and can he do a Rick Grimes impression? I did actually play Rick Grimes in our roast of The Walking Dead many years ago on Screen Junkies Plus. So yes, kind of. My Rick Grimes is just yelling in Southern. So yeah, I have played Rick Grimes exactly once for Screen Junkies. Let's see here. Okay, Joe Bell asks, oh, this is a good one for Eric. Who is your favorite Lord of the Rings character, and why is it Pippin? Or alternate question, what is your favorite action scene, and why is it the Ents versus Isengard?
I did not like the Ents, but I will say my favorite character, I have a favorite character, it's Boromir, because Fellowship's actually the only movie I think I saw more than once. I think I saw it twice. And I liked the conflict there. I liked the angst. I was into that.
Great character.
Bean doing his thing. It was very good.
The best Bean death.
Yes.
I rank it. I do rank it above Ned Stark. Spoiler alerts for both of those characters.
We all know the Sean Bean rule that he's probably gonna die. So.
Kim, do you have a favorite Lord of the Rings character or an action?
In answer to that specific question, why is it Pippin, Billy Boyd, and there's an apple called a Pippin, and I like apples.
and if I were to say it was Pippin, it'd because Billy Boyd, of course, is the seed of Chucky, voices the child of Chucky in that franchise. So there you go. That's why it's Pippin for me.
I did not know that at all.
Otherwise, Gandalf. Just don't need to give a reason.
Yeah, he's Gandalf. Let's see here. Chris Bruce asked, what is the panel's worst theatrical experience? What was your worst experience ever going to a theater?
I mean, I have various bad audience ones that jump out. I remember seeing actually Rise of Skywalker opening weekend in IMAX, and there was this woman ahead of us who kept yelling at us for kicking her seat when we weren't kicking her seat, and then she got up and made this loud racket, and then we were all shushing her, but then she loudly apologized, and we just wanted her to stop talking. She was just horrible. And the other one that leaps out is Comic-Con, because Simpsons movie opened during Comic-Con, and so it was like a sold-out audience of Comic-Conners, but the air conditioning broke, and it was this weird thing of we stubbornly didn't want to leave the Simpsons movie opening night at Comic-Con, and we were also feeling horrible and not in any way enjoying the movie because there was no AC.
Well, and also when you've a
day at the con, yeah.
You spent the day at Comic-Con.
Yes. There was an extra level. You're absolutely correct. we were all coming in there a little, little fresh.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Kim, do you got one?
I do. I mean, it's quite a serious one, but I was at a screening in the UK at the big IMAX theatre in Waterloo of The Dark Knight Rises, and it was shortly after the shooting that had happened in America. At that film, and suddenly, like with about half an hour of the film to go, smoke started filling the auditorium from the bottom, and there was a kind of an acrid smell. And, of course, everybody suddenly panics and just stampeded out of the cinema. But it turns out it was just some kind of defective issue with a kitchen next door. But there was nothing to worry about. But it was very scary for a while. I think one of my friends that I was with was the first person out. No thought for women and children.
You need to stop going to see movies with Billy Zane.
And it sucks when you get interrupted at like near the end of a movie like that, because it's very hard to get that experience of watching it. You know, I mean, again, I know people. I'm not picking a movie that people love like The Dark Knight. Quite the opposite. But when I saw Dark Phoenix at a press screening, right at the conclusion, when they're starting to face off in the train, a fire alarm went off in the theater. Someone had opened the fire exit door and it went off. For a minute, we all talked after. We all had the same thought. We all thought it was in the movie because it was right when an alarm would be playing in the movie. But then it's like, wait, we can't hear what they're saying and it won't turn off.
That's not the train alarm.
Yes. Magneto has nothing to do with this alarm. And they couldn't figure out how to turn it off. And yeah, it was a whole thing.
Yeah, even once they're oh God, we had that happen with Infinity War. I took Portland and I went and saw Infinity War. I'd already seen it once, and the whole cold open played like Hulk fighting, and then I think got dropped into Doctor Strange's place, and the movie just died. And they sheepishly came out and they were like, sorry, we're going to refund your ticket and start the movie over. And it was just like, oh my, cool movie. But, just we're 20 minutes in, man. Oh, God, this is going to be a long day. My bad one is not, I feel bad now. I'm complaining about a lame one. Kim was actually in fear and was abandoned by a friend.
Yeah.
Mine was we went and saw a midnight screening of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when it premiered. And we went specifically at that time, and we went to the Vista because we were like, okay, the Vista will be adults. Just people that are just there to watch the movie, because at the Vista, it's a cool kind of hipster theater here in LA, Kim. But we were kind of like, okay, that'll be just a place where people are cool and know how to watch a movie properly. And it was just full of 14-year-old girls who, anytime either Harry or Ron were just existed, were screaming, just screaming. And I think it was the first time I ever felt old. It was the first time I was like, these kids.
The closest I've ever had my friends and I get into a physical altercation at a movie was in line for one of the Harry Potter movies, when someone cut line right behind us. And it became a whole thing. And this guy was just and this was like an older guy. He was just this jerk who wouldn't admit that he had just cut line, and was like shoving into our friend, and she was yelling at him, and I was like, oh my God, are we gonna get into a fight and line for a Harry Potter movie? But luckily I think security came over and told him he had to get to the back of the damn line. Yes.
Rob, this is a fun one. Rob Turner asked, how would you cheer up Harrison Ford?
I would get him talking about canal boating in Wales. Because he loves that. That's what he does with Callista. That's what his holidays are, and and throughout the rest of Europe, I believe.
That's how you know you're a seasoned interviewer. You know what's up.
I mean, the other thing he's supposed to love is weed, so I think there's, I mean, that's a pretty known thing out there at this point.
Sometimes you just have to lean in. We did. I did an interview with sometimes you just have to, like, I'm going to give you 20 minutes of canal boat talk, and then maybe you'll talk about Harrison Ford for a minute. I did an interview for a Fandom thing with that was like an internal thing, but it was with Marty Cove, Sensei Kreese, who I was so excited to talk to, and he had just watched a documentary about Ulysses S. Grant that he thought was amazing, and he was so excited to just talk about this documentary, and so yeah, it's like we would talk about that for 10 minutes, and then we would talk about the Karate Kid for 2, and then it was back to Grant, and yeah, you just gotta let them talk about their thing, man.
I just shared this story on Twitter, which is, it's funny because, you know, we know, Kim, that we can't really tell some horror stories of interviews to protect ourselves and other,
right.
but you kind of always feel. What'd you say, Joe?
Same with Billy from his days at Wizard Bowl. He's got some tales, man. Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I can talk about Tommy Lee Jones being a terrible interview because, again, it's a known thing. Like, it's a, like, Tommy, which is just, I sat down to interview him, and everyone that day, it was Men in Black 3, and like, oh yeah, he's terrible. And so I sat down, and I was wearing a National Geographic jacket, much like this one that I'd gotten as a freebie at some press event. And so he's sitting there, and he goes, National Geographic. Did you work for National Geographic? And I go, oh no, I just got this as like a freebie. You're like, oh, I did a voiceover for them. I like them. And it's like, oh my God, I should have lied. I should have said I worked for them, because then it was a terrible interview and it gave me one-word answers for everything. It's like, if I said I work for National Geographic, you might have blossomed in front of me and given me great content.
Talking to you about Nat Geo, man.
Right. Let me talk about whatever documentary I did the voiceover for, because I'm clearly more excited about it than talking about Men in Black 3.
Do you have any, Kim, I say we just pivot into this for a minute. Kim, do you have any either nightmare ones you feel comfortable talking about, or great ones?
Yeah, here's a good one that I just thought of. I was Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So I had 2 interviews that day, and they kept switching my time for Arnie around, and I was, you know, I was telling them both that I'm doing this then and what have you. Anyway, they called me. I was way across town, and they called me and said, can you get here, you know, like now for Arnie? I said, well, I'll be there as soon as I can. And I was rushing, and they took me straight into the room, because normally you go into a holding room and you gather your thoughts and get ready, and you're usually waiting about 2 hours. They took me straight in to see him, and I'm holding my iPhone, my iPad, my notebook, my coat, my bag. And he was up, there's a buffet in the room, and he was up picking out food from the buffet. And he turned around, the PR introduced me, Kim, this is Arnold, this is Kim. And he turned around, bit of mustard on his lip. And and I put my hand out to shake it and threw my phone at him, and it bounced his chest onto the floor, and he went, "What the hell is wrong with you?"
Nice. That is great. The other 2 stories, it was a whole thread that Josh Horowitz from MTV started by saying, what's your wacky stories about junkets? And the other 2 I mentioned that were happier than the Tommy Lee Jones one was, the circle game where you try to get people to look at the circle and you punch them in the I didn't know that game. So I was sitting interviewing Josh Hutcherson and Jennifer Lawrence for one of the Hunger Games movies for Catching Fire. And she did that to him. And I guess they've been doing it all day. That is how they're entertaining themselves. So she did that to him, and he looked, he goes, but this is in the middle of our 4-minute interview. And I don't know what just happened. I don't know what just happened that led to her punching him in the shoulder. And I even say, like, I got to ask you about that after. And so then we finish, and I'm standing up. And, you know, as Kim knows, they're trying to get you the hell out of the room. They want you to get the next person in there. Yeah. But I say, what was up with you punching him? And Jennifer Lawrence goes, come here. I walked over, and she just punches me in the shoulder. And it was awesome. It was like, and then later on, I watched the video, and someone explained to me what exactly happened there. There you go.
The one I used to talk about a lot was when I did Rogue One, like Ben Mendelsohn and Mads Mikkelsen were in one room together. That was like way apart from the rest of the junket, because they had a smoking room, because they were just like chain smoking the whole day, and they were just slouching and like it was like going to AP classes and then hanging out in detention. Like they didn't care. They were in like their own little world. It was very funny. But when I did, I try to be careful when I do junkets about what I'm being identified from, because we have a reality. There's like tiers of like, oh, okay, where it's like, Fandom is starting to start to be like a name they know. Screen Junkies, maybe. Honest Trailers, they know, right? But I also try to be careful because, like, if your movie sucks and they're like, "This is Joe from Honest Trailers," like, right. That's a much different interview, right? And so I tried to be really clear when I did that junket for The Nun, where they sent us to Mexico in the middle of nowhere. That I was like, oh, it's from Screen Junkies, from Screen Junkies, from Screen Junkies. And they're like, yeah. And they we screened the movie, and it was The Nun. And like the next day was the junkets, and they like walked me into like to the director, and they're like, oh, this is one of the Honest Trailer guys, and just like sat me in my chair. And it was just like the vibe changed, and it was just weird. And he was like, so what are you going to say in the thing? And I was like, oh, this is fun. You reap what you sow, I guess.
The other funny one, by the way, I realize this is ironic since we're about to lead into a junket I did with Marvel people. But a funny experience I had was the first Avengers junket, just because it was kind of not what you want, which is day 3. It was like a 3-day junket, and I got them like the end of day 3. So you know they're burnt out. You know it's been them doing interview after interview after. And
that's
so
when you talk to Harrison Ford about voting.
Right. And a lot of them were just visibly tired, which you understand. But it was funny. I talked to Renner, Scarlett Johansson and Jeremy Renner together, and I walked in and they had a big plate of cookies. I think they actually offered me when I came in. Oh, you want some of these cookies? Thank you. And then I'm interviewing them, and I was asking them a question that was like an innocuous question about S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, like, oh, how do these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents react to these superhero things and whatnot? And then I can't remember who turned to who. One of them turns to the other, goes, what do you think S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are paid? I don't know. Maybe they're paid. They go, maybe they're paid in cookies. Yeah. And it was really funny, but I remember the editor kept it in. And I'm like, there is zero context for why they're bringing up these cookies for people who did not have the pre-camera conversation I just had with them where they offered me a cookie.
Although I tell you what, now that you're in an organization that would try to build an entire show of how do you pay S.H.I.E.L.D. agents,
right. There you go. Jeremy Renner, Scarlett Johansson think it might be cookies.
Well, speaking of that, and thank you guys both for hanging out with me and talking Lord of the Rings and swapping some tales of throwing phones at Arnold. That's amazing. Set us up for our WandaVision goodness.
The WandaVision, which I did not get anyone when they were tired. I was actually saying I was the one tired because Elizabeth Olsen was in London where Kim is. And so I spoke to her at 6 a.m. for me and then waited a few hours, talked to everyone else and tried to caffeinate. I talked to Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany and the director, Matt Shakman, who, if you look at his IMDb, is fascinating because he's directed a few Game of Thrones episodes and Fargo episodes, but he also directed like dozens of Always Sunny episodes, which I've actually been binging right now. So I was talking to him about that. I talked to the 3 of them about the show and getting a little weird. We were talking about before we started taping about how, Legion obviously was a very weird Marvel project, but not done under the Kevin Feige Marvel Studios of it all. And how this has kind of taken them in a different direction and what they might say to naysayers who say all superhero projects feel the same. So I had a fun chat with those guys.
Check it out, you guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
We are an unusual couple, you know.
Oh, I don't think that was ever in question.
You see some people complain.
I think it's usually said by people that actually haven't seen a superhero movie since the 80s, and I think that Marvel has always taken big swings. So I think it's a spurious accusation anyway.
I just felt like I was just thrown into the Twilight Zone. And so I would like to say, yes, that a superhero story can be literally anything. And I think our show tries to prove that through sitcom.
Absolutely. I think WandaVision is original and different and exciting, but it's telling a really wonderful big human story. It's a romance, it's a mystery, it's an adventure story, and hopefully people are excited for that.
This is our home now. I want us to fit in.
So this is the first time we've got to see Wanda and Vision sort of together and happy for a sustained amount of time, granted within a very strange situation. So it's interesting for you to sort of juggle the purposely mannered sitcom aspects with wanting to have some emotional moments that really land between them.
Frankly, it was great to have the screen time because, necessarily so, there's so many characters in these movies now that it's a feat of paranormal magic to make the movies make sense, and you necessarily so have a very limited amount of screen time with which to cram in your journey. And Lizzie and I have been lucky enough to always find our own lane in those. But it was really great to be able to be expansive about it.
I think that's what's really fun for us is, Vision and Wanda in the suburbs and trying to not be found out and trying to just be accepted as normal. And also like what their roles are in their relationship kind of shift and change, and he becomes this kind of bumbling man with information, and she's the more solid force between the two of them.
Their relationship, those actors, Paul and Lizzie, have incredible chemistry together. They're brilliant, but also those characters, they have such chemistry. I mean, here's this fiery person who suffered all this loss and trauma, and you have this person who's kind of human in a way, small part human, but yet feels more human than any of us. He's sort of the great philosopher of the human condition, and this kind of calm, kind of beautiful, calm lake and this fiery storm kind of coming together. And it feels so right, and I think we all kind of lean forward because we understand how that opposites attract and how they complete each other. And so this is a show that explores, draws on that, builds on that.
We just don't know what to expect.
Kevin has touted that this show will be where we finally see Wanda kind of fully become the Scarlet Witch. Anything you can say about perhaps getting to see Wanda a little more unleashed than we have before?
I think she comes from such a place of goodness, and it's really a show that we all get to watch her and process her life experiences with her.
She is an incredibly powerful figure. We know she almost took down Thanos. She is this, she has a great deal of untapped power. She's never been called the Scarlet Witch before. We need to figure out who that is and figure out a little bit more about that.
I think something's wrong here. Wanda, can you hear me? Who's doing this to you?
I have to ask, you're working with Sam Raimi right now on Doctor Strange. He helped shape the modern superhero movie. So is it really cool to work with him and see him return to Marvel? And how interesting should the visuals be in this movie, given what Sam is capable of?
It's really incredible getting to work with him. And I loved hearing some of his pre-Kevin Feige Marvel stories, really, like how it all kind of came to be with the films. And he has some great stories, and I do love working with him because of what you're saying, the playfulness of his use of camera. And it's been I wish we could be working right now, but we had a pause. But he's I really loved the small bit of time I've been able to spend with him.
Spark of love that fills me.
Am I dead?
No. Why would you think that?
You obviously couldn't have seen where this was all going, but is it kind of strange for you to just think back 13 years ago, you were playing the voice in Robert Downey Jr.'s head, or, this voice speaking to him, and now here you are as one of the title characters on this series.
Yeah, it's so funny because, of course, for me, it's all been happening incrementally, but when somebody like your good self reminds you, you go, wow, that is crazy. It's crazy that that's how it all happened.
Well, I think we handled that well.